Okay, let's continue. Greg got his tuxedo jacket and walked over to the ER desk to sign the paperwork indicating the patient was deceased and that the cause was cardiac arrest following myocardial infarction. Then he went out into the emergency room waiting area. Leona was seated among the sick, the injured, and their families. She was flipping through an old magazine. Dressed as she was, she appeared to Craig's like a nugget of gold, a nugget of gold among nondescript gravel. Her eyes rose up as he approached. He could tell she read his expression. No luck? Craig shook his head. He scanned the waiting area. Where's Jordan, Stanhope? He left over an hour ago. Really? Why? What did he say? He said he preferred to be home, where he would await your call. He said something about hospital depressing him. Craig gave a short laugh. I guess that's consistent. I always thought of him as a rather cold, duck who. Oh, it should be Craig. Oh, I guess that's consistent. I always thought of him as a rather cold, duck who was just going through the motion with his wife. Leona tossed aside the magazine and followed Greg out into the night. He thought about saying something philosophical about life to Leona, but changed his mind. He didn't think she'd understand, and he was worried he wouldn't be able to explain it. Neither spoke until they got to the car. Do you want me to drive? Leona asked. Greg shook his head, opened the passenger door for Leona, then walked around and climbed in behind the wheels. He didn't start the car immediately. We obviously missed the concert, he said, staring out through the windshield. To say the least, Leona said. It's after 10. What would you like to do? Greg didn't have any idea, but he knew he had to call Jordan Stanhope and wasn't looking forward to it. Losing a patient must be hardest things about being a doctor, Leona said. Sometimes it's dealing with the survivors, Greg responded, without any idea how prophetic his comment would turn out to be. New York, New York, 7:10 p.m. Dr. Jack Stapleton had been sitting in his cramped office on the fifth floor of the office of the chief medical examiner for more hours than he was willing to admit. His office mate, Dr. Chet McGovern, had deserted him just after 4 when Chet left for his woodwork at his Bush Midtown gym. As was often the case, he'd buggered Jack to come along with glowing tales of the newest batch of nubile female member in his body sculpting class. With their skin-tight outfit that left nothing to the imagination. But Jack had begged off with his customary rejoinder that he preferred being a participant rather than an observer when it came to sports. He couldn't believe that Chet could still laugh at what had become such a hackneyed comeback. At 5 o'clock, Dr. Lauren Montgomery, Jack's colleague and soulmate, had poked her head in to say she was heading home to shower and change for the romantic rendezvous Jack had arranged for the two of them that evening at their favorite New York restaurant, Elio's, where they had had a number of memorable dinners over the years. She had just suggested he come along to freshen up as well, but he again begged off, saying he was swamped with work and had met her at the restaurant at 8. And like Chet, she didn't try to change his mind. From her perspective, it was such a rare event for Jack to be resourceful on a weeknight that she wanted to bend over backward in hope of encouraging such behavior. His usual evening plans included a death-defying dash home on his mountain bike, a strenuous run on the neighborhood basketball court with his neighborhood buddies, a quick salad at one of the Columbus Avenue restaurant around 9, followed soon after a mute collapse into bed. Despite what he had said, Jack didn't have that much to do and had been scrounging around to keep himself busy, particularly over the last hour. Even before he had sat down at his desk, he had been reasonably caught up with all his outstanding autopsy cases. The reason he was forcing himself to labor this particular afternoon was to keep his mind occupied in a vain attempt to control the anxiety he felt about his secret plans for the evening. The process of submerging himself in either his work or strenuous athletic activity had been his balm and salvation for more than 14 years. So he wasn't about to abandon the bros now. Unfortunately, his contrived work wasn't holding his interest, especially since he was running out of things to do. His mind was beginning to wander into forbidden areas, which began to torment him into having second thoughts about the evening plans. It was at that moment that his cell phone came to life. He glanced at his watch. There was less than an hour to go before D-Day. He felt his pulse accelerated. A phone call at that moment was an unsuspicious sign, since the chances of it being Lori were nil. The changes were huge. It was someone who could throw the evening schedule out of whack. Pulling the phone from his belt clip, Jack eyed the LCD screen. Just as he feared, it was Alan Essenberg. Alan was one of the pathology residents who was being paid by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner to cover routine problem after hours, which the forensic investigator on duty thought needed the attention of a medical doctor. If the problem was beyond the pathology resident comfort zone, then the medical examiner on call had to be contacted. Tonight, it was Jack. "Sorry to have called you, Dr. Stapleton," Alan said, his voice whiny and grating. "What's the problem?" "It's a suicide, sir." Okay, so what's the question? Can't you guys handle it? Jack didn't know Alan very well, but he knew Steve Marriott, the evening forensic investigator who was experienced. It's a high profile case, sir. The deceased is the wife or girlfriend of an Iranian diplomat. He's been screaming of everyone and threatening to call the Iranian ambassador. Mr. Marriott called me for backup, but I feel like I'm in over my head. Jack didn't respond. It was inevitable. He would have to visit the scene. Such high profile case invariably took invariably took on political implication, which was the part of Jack's job that be that he detested. He had no idea if he'd be able to make the site visit and still get to the restaurant by 8, which only added to his anxiety. Are you still there, Dr. Stapleton? Last time I looked, Jack retorted. I thought maybe we've been in cut off, Alan said. Anyway, the location is apartment 54J in the United Nations Towers on 47th Street. Has the body been moved or touched? Jack pulled on his brown corduroy jacket, unconsciously patting the square object in its right pocket. Not by me, the forensic investigator. What about the police? Jack started down the hallway toward the elevators. The hall was deserted. I don't believe so, but didn't I ask yet? What about the husband or boyfriend? You should ask the police. The detective in charge is standing next to me. It should be like this. You should ask the police. The detective in charge is standing next to me and he wants to talk with you. Put him on. Hey, buddy, the loud voice said, forcing Jack to pull the phone away from his ear. Get your ass over here. Jack recognized the gravely joyous voice as that of his friend of 10 years, Detective Lieutenant Lou Soldano of the Homicide Division of the New York City Police Department. Jack had known Lou almost as long as he had known Laurie. It had been Laurie who had introduced them. I might have known you've been behind this, Jack lamented. I hope you remember that we're supposed to be in Elliot's at 8. Hey, I don't schedule this crap. It happened when it happens. What are you doing at a suicide? What are you doing at a suicide? You guys think it might not be. Hell no. It's a suicide, all right, with a contact gunshot wound on the right temple. My presence is a special request from my beloved captain in appreciation of the parties involved and how much flack they are potentially capable of producing. Are you coming or what? I'm on my way. Has the body been moved or touched? Not by us. Who is the yelling? Who is that yelling in the background? That's the diplomat husband or boyfriend. We have yet to figure out. He's a little squirt, but he's fitty and makes me appreciate the silent grieving type. He's been yelling at us since we got here, trying to boss us around like Napoleon. What's his problem? Jack asked. He wants us to cover his naked wife or girlfriend and his mother than hell because we insist on not disturbing the scene until you guys finish checking it out. Hold on. Jack said. Are you telling me the woman's naked? Naked as a jaybird. And to top it off, she doesn't even have any pubic hair. She's shaved like cue ball, which... Lo, Jack interrupted. It wasn't a suicide. Excuse me? Lou questioned, with disbelief. Are you trying to tell me you can tell this was a homicide without even seeing the scene? I look at the scene, but yes, I'm telling you it wasn't a suicide. Was there a note? Supposedly, but it's in Farsi, so I don't know what it says. The diplomat says it's a suicide note. It wasn't a suicide, Lou. Jack repeated. The elevator arrived. He boarded but kept the door from closing. He didn't want to lose the connection with Lou. I'll even put a fiver on it. I've never heard of a case of a woman committing suicide in the nude. It just doesn't happen. You're joking! No, I'm not. The thought is that not the way woman suicide victim wants to be found. You'd better act accordingly and get your crime scene people there. And you know the fisty diplomat husband or whatever he is has to be your number one suspect. Don't let him disappear into the Iranian mission. You might not see him again. And the elevator door closed as Jack flipped his phone shut. He hoped there wasn't a deeper meaning behind the interruption of this evening plans. Jack true pity Nori was the fear that death stalked the people he loved, making him complicit when they died. He looked at his watch. It was now 20 after 7. Damn! He said out loud and slapped the elevator door a few times with the palm of his hand in frustration. Maybe he should rethink the whole idea. With the rapidity burned of repetition, Jack got his mountain bike from the area of the morgue where the Pottersfield coffin were stored, unlocked it, put on his helmet, and wheeled it out on the 30th Street loading dock. Between the mortuary vans, he climbed on and cycled out into the street. At the corner, he turned right into the Fifth Avenue. Once he was on the bike, Jack's anxieties melted away. Standing up, he put muscle onto his pumping, and the bike shot forward. Rapidly picking up speed, rush hour traffic has abated to a degree, and the cars, taxis, buses, and trucks were moving at a good clip. Jack was not able to keep up, but it was close. Once he had achieved his cruising speed, he settled back into the seat and shifted onto a higher gear. From his daily bike riding and basketball playing, he was a tiptoe shape. The evening was glorious with golden glow, suffusing the cityscape. Individual skyscrapers stood out sharply against the blue sky, the hue of which was deepening with every passing minute. Jack struck past the New York University Medical Center on his right, and a little farther north, the UN General Assembly complex. When he could, Jack moved to his left so that he was able to turn onto 47th Street, which was one-way convenient heading east. The UN Tower was a few doors up from First Avenue. Sheathed in a glass and marbled, the structure soared up an impressive 60 some odd stories into the evening sky. Directly in front of the awning that stretches from its entrance to the street were several New York City squad cars with their light flashing. Hardened New Yorker walked by without a glance. There was also a battered Chevy Malibu double parked next to one of the squad cars. Jack recognized it as Lowe's. In front of the Malibu was a Health and Human Services mortuary van. As Jack locked his bike to a no parking signpost, his anxieties returned. The ride had been too short to have any lasting effect. It was now 7:30. He flashed his medical examiner badge to the uniformed doorman and was directed to the 54th floor. Up in apartment 45J, things had quieted considerably when Jack walked in. Lou Soldano, Alan Essenberg, Steve Marriott, and a number of uniformed officers were sitting around the living room it were a doctor as if it were a doctor's waiting room. "What gives?" Jack asked Silent Rhine. There wasn't even any conversation. "We're waiting on you and the crime scene people," Lou said as he got to his feet. The other followed suit. Instead of Lou's signature rumpled and slightly disheveled attire, he was wearing a tightly pressed shirt bottomed to the neck, a subdued new tie, and a tasteful, although not terribly well-fitted clean-paid sport jacket that was too small for his stocky frame. Lou was a seasoned detective, having been in an organized crime unit for 6 years before moving over to homicide, where he'd been for more than a decade, and he looked the part. "I have to say you look pretty fit, spiffy," Jack commented. Even Lou's closely cropped hair looked recently brushed, and his famous 5 o'clock shadow was nowhere to be seen. This is sorry. This is as good as it gets, Lou commented, lifting his arms as if flexing his bicep for effect. "In celebration of your dinner party, I smoke home and change. What's the occasion, by the way?" "Where's the diplomats?" Jack asked, ignoring Lou's question. He glanced into the kitchen and a room that was used as a dining room. Except for the living room, the apartment seems empty. "He's Flo the coop," Lou said. "He stormed out of here just after I hung up with you, threatening all of us with dire consequences." "You shouldn't have let him go," Jack said. "What was I supposed to do?" Lou complained. "I didn't have an arrest warrant." "Couldn't you have held him for questioning until I got over here?" Listen, the captain sent me on this case keep things simple and not to rock the boat. Holding that guy at this stage would be wrecking the boat big time. Okay, Jack said. That's your problem, not mine. Let's see the body. Lou gestured towards the open bedroom door. Do you have an ID on the woman's yet? Jack asked. Not yet. The building supervisor says she's only been here less than a month and didn't speak much English. Jack looked in the scene before homing in on the body. There was a slight butcher shop odor. The decor read designer. The walls and carpet were all black. The ceiling mirrored. And the curtain clatter of knickknacks. And furniture all white, including the bed linen. As Lou had explained, the corpse was completely naked, lying supine across the bed with the feet dangling over the bed's left side. Although darkly completed in life, she was now ashen against the sheet, except for some bruising about the face, including a black eye. Her arms were splayed out to the side with the palm up. An automatic pistol was loosely held in her right hand, with her index finger inside the trigger guard. Her head was turned slightly toward the left. Her eyes were open. High on the right temple was evidence of an strange gunshot wound. Behind the head on the white sheet was a large blood stain, extending away from the victim. To her left was some blood splatter, along with bits of tissue. Some of these Middle Eastern guys can be brutal with their women, Jack said. So I've heard, Lou said. Is that bruising and black eye from the bullet wound? I doubted it, Jack said, then turned back to Stephen and Alan. Have our pictures been taken of the body? Yes, they have, Steve Marriott called from over near the door. Jack pulled on a pair of latex rubber gloves and carefully separated the woman's dark, almost black hair to expose the entrance wound. There was a distinct stellate form to the lesion, indicating that the muzzle of the gun had been in contact with the victim when it had discharged. Carefully, Chuck rolled the woman's head to the side to look at the exit wound. It was low down below the left ear. He straightened it up. Well, that's more evidence, he said. Evidence of what? Lou asked. That this wasn't a suicide, Jack said. The bullet traveled from above on an angle downward. That's not the way people shot themselves. Jack formed a gun with his right hand and placed the tip of his index finger as the hypothesis muscle next to his temple. The plane of the finger was parallel with the floor. When people shot themselves, the track of the bullet is generally almost horizontal or maybe slightly upward, never downwards. This was a homicide staged to look like a suicide. Thanks a lot, Lou grumbled. I was hoping your deduction about her being naked would prove to be wrong. Sorry, Jack said. Any idea how long she's been dead? Not yet, but a wild guess would say not that long. Anybody hear a gunshot? That would be more accurate. Unfortunately, no, Lou said. Lieutenant, one of the uniformed policemen called out from the doorway. The crime scene boys have arrived. Tell them to get their butts in here. Lou responded over his shoulder. Then to Jack he asked, Are you done or what? I'm done. We'll have more information for you in the morning. I'll be sure to do the post myself. In that case, I'll try to make it too. Over the years, Lou had learned to appreciate how much information could be gleaned from victim of homicide during an autopsy. All right then, Jack said, snapping off the gloves. I'm sure I'm out of here. He glanced at his watch. He wasn't late yet, but he was going to be. It was 7:52. It was going to take him more than 8 minutes to get to the restaurant. He looked at Lou, who was bending over to examine a small tear in the sheet several feet away from the body, in the direction of the headboard. What do you have? What do you think of this? Think it might be where the slug penetrated the mattress. Jack leaned over to examine the centimeter-long linear defect. He nodded. That would be a guess. There's a tiny bit of blood stain along the edge. Lou straightened up as the crime scene technician carried in their equipment. Lou mentioned getting the slug, and the technician assured him they'd do their best. Are you going to be able to get away from here at some reasonable time? Jack inquired. Lou shrugged. No reason why I can't live with you.